Sweet. All right. Thanks for coming out today, guys. First off, I want to continue the audience interaction bit and see how many of y'all have actually ridden a mule in the canyon. Decent amount, but not a whole lot. Okay, y'all may have remembered some of the great yarns that the guides told y'all about the mule riding industry at the canyon. And as a wrangler and a guide, I became interested in the... Up, higher? Is that better? No? Better, okay. I became interested in these stories that the wranglers kept telling, and I wanted to find out how factual they were. As it turns out, there's a lot of gray in there, but my research has found to be much more interesting the stories they told. So, as some of y'all who heard Chris's speech yesterday answer this question a little bit, why mules? Well, mules are very sure-footed. Their hooves are more narrow than a horse's hoof. And of course, a mule is a combination of a father donkey and a mother horse. Mules also need less water. They can go greater distances between drinking. They can carry heavier weights than a horse and a mule, or a donkey rather. I'm getting some, how's that? Okay. So they can forage off of lower grade forage than a horse can without getting sick, and they also have an incredible sense of self-preservation. They're not going to go over an edge if they aren't going to think about it first. So the mule riding industry started, as we heard earlier, with Captain John Hance. Hance began doing his tour rides at his trail, but with the arrival of the train, everything gravitated towards the center of the canyon, or the trail, at which point the Bright Angel Trail became the almost exclusive mule riding trail in the canyon. Now, Ralph Cameron owned this trail, patented initially in 1891, and by 1903, he had secured rights from Secretary of the Interior Ethan Allen Hitchcock to extract tolls from this ride. That ignited another 25 years of legal wrangling between Cameron, Coconino County, the National Park Service, Forest Service, and the Fred Harvey Company. Now, as the franchise for the toll road ended in 1891, was extended in 1891 for a 5-year bit, at which point the revised statutes of Arizona stated that a toll road would go to the county. Ralph Cameron, knowing this, had himself appointed or voted into as the Coconino County Board of Supervisors chair, at which point he began promoting what is known as the Cameron Bill, which would change those statutes to allow counties to give the trail back to the original owner, aka Ralph Cameron. So he was able to push that through and then took over the trail again privately for another 5 years before it was again given back to the county. So as the trail was in its infancy, it initially just dropped down to the river. And so how are you going to get a mule across the river? Well, before these two tram systems, the best way to do it was to swim the animals across. Of course, this can only be done at lower water, which meant that they could only get to the North Rim through certain parts of the year. On the left is the Russ Tramway, and on the right is the Bass Tramway. You'll notice that the dimensions of these two cages are rather similar in length and width. That is to accommodate one animal at a time, and the width is so that the animal can't really twist around and cause a wreck on the cable. So in 1911, after the Fred Harvey Company and Santa Fe Railroad was not able to push Cameron off of his trail, they decided the best thing to do was to economically undermine the trail by creating their own free trail, untolled, 8 miles east at Hermit Trail. Also there, they built the Hermit Camp, which competed with Ralph Cameron's Indian Garden Camp. This trail was modern in the sense that they were using corrugated concrete to provide a better surface for mules to go down so they weren't slipping and sliding. And it also expanded tourism. It now offered the opportunity to go from Hermit's to Bright Angel and then back if you wanted to. Now, it also gave the opportunity to get to the river without paying the toll road. Now, the Kolb Studio, it was originally brought from Williams in October of 1903. The wood from that studio was given to Ralph Cameron to build a barn at his studio, or at his corrals. If you notice these photos, they're pretty grainy. You can't really see the person in the back all that well. And also the mules are strung out head to tail. Now, both of these photos are from 1924, one from September and one from April. And if you notice the photo on the right, the mules are beginning to cock out into the canyon a little bit. And it's kind of bringing the whole trail down a little bit. And also that the mule riding industry, it seems to have this masculine air about it. But if you can look at these photos, particularly the one on the left, women made up a large portion of these mule riding parties. In fact, sometimes even the entire party. The Grand Canyon Working Plan of 1916 called for a limit of 5 women or 5 children on any party, thinking anything else might be reckless. It's a little bit presumptive. But as you notice, the party on the left is strung out head to tail, and the party on the right is more cocked. Now, it's my theory that the Wranglers were working with the Kolb brothers to improve their business model. If you can turn every mule out, just like a parking lot, you're going to fit more cars into a space if they're all shoulder to shoulder. Not only that, but you can see the person in the back more clearly. And if you're in the business of selling photographs to tourists, it helps if you can actually see the person in the back. So between 1924 and 1930, you start seeing the transformation with all the mules learning to face outwards. And so by 1930, all mule parties are facing outwards. And furthermore, every mule party that rides into the canyon today is told that mules face outward to see where not to go. And while this is clearly an advisable suggestion, it's my theory that the mules learned this habit of turning outwards at the Kolb studio, since it was the first place they stopped once entering the canyon, and they learned to turn outwards. These creatures of habit, is my theory, began associating with the act of stopping with the act of turning out into the canyon. And still today, every party turns out into the canyon. In 1919, of course, the National Park Service takes over the area and immediately begins improving the crossing of the river. As we heard earlier, some bits of the reason were for administrative purposes, but also for the mule riding industry that was at this point expanding as well. In this quote from Superintendent White in 1922, "The mule trip from rim to rim will become the greatest scenic journey in the United States." And upon its completion in 1921, Edith Kolb was said to be the first person to cross it. Now here again, you get a sense of the bridge's width. Also, again, it's narrow so that you're not going to have the opportunity for a mule to spin around in the middle of the bridge and make up its own mind as to where it wants to go. So it's funneling the passengers across the river. Also, the height of the cage or the railings are higher so that it contains a rider as they go through. With the completion of the bridge and the beginning of Phantom Ranch, the mule riding participation again increased. Now, it's really important to consider the development of Phantom Ranch could not have been done without mules. Every window, every door knob, every piece of timber, everything that wasn't taken from the ground upon which it was built was brought down by a mule. Next time you're at Phantom Ranch, take a look at some of these rafter sets in the cabins, and you'll notice that they're 2 pieces of wood spliced together, about 8 or 9 feet long. The reason is that an 8 or 9 foot length of board is the longest length that a mule could safely navigate these tight switchbacks. In reference, this piece up here is about 5 feet long. So as Phantom Ranch began to host more and more people, they needed better accommodations. This is a washing machine that was packed down by a mule. You can see it's pretty awkward load, no doubt pretty heavy too. And to provide recreators even more opportunity, Bright Angel Creek was stocked with trout. How did they get there? They were packed in these milk jugs and then brought down and released upon various points of the creek. In 1924, the Coconino County citizens voted down the sale of the Bright Angel Trail to the National Park Service, again influenced by Ralph Cameron, who was at this point a senator. So the Park Service, again, went with the economic undermining method. They built the South Kaibab Trail from Yaqui Point down to the existing trail at Tip-Off. This trail is interesting in that since it was not going down a natural fault line like the Bright Angel Trail, the engineers could decide where the trail went. An important aspect of this was keeping it in direct sunlight the entire way. Anyone who's ever walked down the Bright Angel Trail after a storm like today knows that the snow will stay there for a long time, even after the sun has come out and melted everything else around it, since it sits in a nice shady bowl. The South Kaibab Trail, like I said, stays dry, and the snow melts off quicker. All the mules, and once the snow starts flying, are shod with what's referred to as a sharp shod shoe. It's bits of iron that are welded onto the shoe to perform as a cleat. In the past, these have been used, nuts, bolts have been bolted on, or welded on rather, but the idea is to essentially make a cleated hook, or shoe. By 1928, the mule riding parties had increased so drastically, especially with the development of the South Kaibab Trail, which offered just an enormous range of options, riding options at that point. So you could do trips from Hermits to South Kaibab. You could stay at Phantom, go to Rainbow Falls, and then up the South Kaibab. You could do rim-to-rim trails on the South Kaibab. One of the more interesting trips offered was the opportunity to get off a train here at the station, get on the mule, have all your luggage packed down across the canyon, get to the North Rim, be met by Union Pacific Transport, and then whisked away to other national parks. For the trip of a lifetime, the overly ambitious hikers could call in a rescue mule if they got to the bottom and didn't feel like climbing out, at a rate of $7 a mule plus a $5 guide fee. And this was all being promoted by the developments in the Inner Canyon. So the bridge, as you can see here, accommodates an entire string of mules, whereas before the swinging bridge could only handle one mule at a time. All materials were brought down by the mules, dozens and dozens and dozens of mule trips coming down in the canyon. This is a scene of about 20 mules coming down the tip-off area, heading towards the river, loaded with all sorts of materials, from cables to pipes to jackhammers to all sorts of things. Here again is unloading the materials near the mouth of the tunnel. You can see coils of pipes and ropes. So they weren't only packing the supplies down. Here is a coil of steel cable being sledded down by a mule being driven. And you can imagine navigating these trails that, you're thinking before that they're not as improved as they are now, clearly. Here's a photo of both mule bridges before the lower one was destroyed. Again, the new bridge was designed also with the specifications of allowing just enough width for a packed mule to go through it. The sides are narrow and the railings are high, again, to help funnel mules across the span. In 1933, Company 818 of the Civilian Conservation Corps took up residency at Phantom Ranch and along Bright Angel Creek. Some of the most important things they did was to work on the river trail. This included the use of over 40,000 pounds of dynamite alone on this section. On the Clear Creek Trail section, they used over 10,000 pounds of dynamite. They went through thousands of drill bits to plug these holes with dynamite before exploding. Just as a frame of reference, 40,000 pounds of dynamite would take about 340 mules worth of loading to go down. If you're averaging about 100 to 200 pounds of mule transporting goods into the canyon, really adds up quick. The Trans-Canyon telephone line is unique in that the poles that they're standing on, they ranged in 4-foot sections to 8-foot sections. Again, that is basing it on the limitations that a mule can carry and navigate these trails. So the inner canyon workings is really determined on just what a mule can do, which is interesting to think about. Now, you got over 200 folks working in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, using explosives, using jackhammers, doing hard manual labor. You're bound to get some folks that are injured. You can't call an ambulance in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, but you certainly can call an ambulance. This is a specially trained pair of mules with a specially fitted pack saddle gurney that hauled 34 injured and sick Civilian Conservation Corps people out from the bottom of the Grand Canyon. It took 4 people on each extremity to help balance the load, and one person leading the mule to guide them out. It took about 4 hours, as they said, which is pretty quick pace coming out of the canyon. And it wasn't all packing supplies and riding tourists at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. This is a mule plowing the rim trail along the Bright Angel. Probably use one of these this weekend if I had to say. And not all pack trips into the canyon return safely. This photo on the left is a mule that looked like it took a tumble, destroyed its pack, and got tangled up in its mess. This photo on the right is a situation I had to deal with one day at the top of the Red and Whites where this pack saddle slipped off. The mule was in the middle of the string. Thank goodness he calmly stood there and let me fix it, but it could have definitely been a hairy situation. In January of 1921, National Park Service packer Homer Arn was leading a string of 11 mules to take supplies to the bridge that was being built. This particular train was carrying dynamite used to blow up the rock down there, and there was a mule that was green to the trail and hadn't been down much. The trail was icy at the top. The mule slipped. It brought down 3 other mules with it, and they tumbled several hundred feet into the canyon. 3 of the mules did perish, and the dynamite, fortunately, did not explode. But Fred Harvey trips were canceled that day, not because of the accident, but because their mules refused to move past the scent of a dead mule in the trail. And they say that no person has ever died from a mule trip in the Grand Canyon. That is inaccurate. No tourist has ever died from a mule. In 1951, a wrangler did fall off of off the mule at the top of the Bright Angel Trail and did perish. But that has been the only reported death of a wrangler or of a person and a mule. So when we think about mule riding industry and the mule riding industry today at the Grand Canyon, what we're really talking about is heritage tourism. At this point, folks are coming to the Grand Canyon to get a sense of what it used to be like. The tack, the saddles, they're all the same as what they were 120 years ago when this industry started. Some things have changed. You notice this photo in the center, there's about 20 riders on the trail in this group, whereas the photo on the right, lower right, there's much fewer. If you have 20 mules on the trail at one time, it's going to be a tremendous impact on the trail itself. So not only that, but at one point, the mule riding industry was the only folks really going into the canyon. Clearly, hiking has now far exceeded those who enter the canyon over mule riders. So working with the hiker-mule rider interface has been a consideration as well. But, you know, folks are coming to play cowboy and get a sense of what it was like. This photo over here is our friend Jackal the Raven, who follows every mule train every morning from about Skeleton Point to tip-off. He hangs out with the Santera Packers. So I just want to say thanks a lot for coming out and enjoying this wonderful event that's been hosted, and I encourage everyone who has not ridden a mule to ride one into the canyon, and also really to consider the enormous impact that these animals have had in the development of Grand Canyon National Park. Thank you very much.